She walked slowly along the Florida shoreline, the sand warm beneath her feet. The sound of the waves filled the silence inside her chest. After the divorce, loneliness was heavy, but relief whispered softly within. She had finally ended a relationship where companionship had faded years ago. With every step, she felt both fragile and strangely free. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, vast and unpredictable. Its rhythms seemed to echo her own heart, still beating despite the storms it had endured. She paused, staring at the horizon where the sun dipped low. For the first time in months, she wondered if there was something waiting beyond her pain, something new, something alive, something hers. Her thoughts turned to the years she had spent hiding her own dreams. She had been a wife, a caretaker, a listener, but rarely herself. Now, at 55, she faced the unknown with trembling hands. The fear was real, yet so was the quiet spark of possibility. She didn't know what she wanted, only that it was time to begin. A group of surfers rushed past her, laughing, boards under their arms. Their joy was contagious, their freedom written across each smile. She envied their courage, their ease on the water. Watching them run, she felt an ache inside her chest, like a door cracking open. Could she, too, find something that set her spirit free? She sat on the sand, hugging her knees, the waves rolling closer. The idea seemed absurd, even impossible. Yet, as the surfers rode the sea, she felt a strange pull. Maybe this wasn't about skill or age. Maybe it was about daring to live again. With that thought, a small seed of hope began to grow. Her eyes followed the ocean as dusk painted it gold. She imagined herself standing on a board, fragile but fierce. The picture was blurry, unfinished, but alive. She whispered to herself that perhaps the sea held answers, and in that whisper, courage quietly stirred. The night fell gently, stars shimmering above her. The beach grew quiet, but inside, her heart was restless. She knew she couldn't ignore the call of the ocean forever. Tomorrow would bring a choice: stay where she was, or step toward something new. The waves seemed to wait for her reply. The next morning, she returned to the beach earlier than usual. The salty air greeted her, fresh and sharp against her skin. She stood still, watching the endless rise and fall of the waves. Something inside her stirred with each crash. It was no longer just the ocean, it was an invitation. She noticed surfers already out on the water, gliding with grace. Their bodies bent and shifted as if they belonged to the sea. She couldn't look away, mesmerized by the dance between human and wave. Every fall was followed by another try, another chance. Their persistence sparked a thought she had long forgotten: resilience. A memory surfaced of her younger self, daring and fearless. She remembered climbing trees, barefoot, racing through rainstorms, laughing without hesitation. Where had that girl gone? Life had buried her under routines and responsibilities. But perhaps she wasn't gone, just waiting. The sea seemed to call her back to that hidden part of herself. A child nearby built a sandcastle with determination. He cheered when it stood tall, then laughed as a wave knocked it down. Instantly, he started again, smiling brighter with each attempt. She watched him, realizing life was not about avoiding the waves, but meeting them. She felt a lesson in his joy, a reflection of what she needed. Her heart raced at the thought of trying. 55 felt too late, too clumsy, too far. Yet the ocean didn't care about numbers or years. Its song was timeless, its embrace open to anyone. She touched the water with her toes, cold and alive. A shiver of fear mixed with excitement ran through her. She imagined the whispers of doubt from others. Friends might laugh, neighbors might question her sanity, but wasn't courage about stepping forward anyway? Her eyes lingered on the surfers again. If they could fall and rise, so could she. Age was only a number, her spirit was ageless. The tide rolled in stronger, soaking the hem of her dress. She didn't move back. Instead, she let it wash over her, letting go of hesitation. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would ask about lessons. A new beginning was no longer just an idea, was a promise forming in her heart. The morning sun was bright when she walked into the surf shop. The smell of wax and salt water filled the air, foreign yet inviting. Boards leaned against the walls like silent guardians of the sea. She hesitated at the doorway, her doubts rushing back. But then she remembered the relief she felt after her divorce. Freedom deserved to be honored. The young clerk behind the counter smiled warmly. "Looking for something?" he asked kindly. She blushed, feeling suddenly out of place. I want to learn how to surf," she admitted. His eyes lit up with encouragement rather than surprise. For the first time, her dream didn't sound foolish. It sounded possible. He handed her a pamphlet about beginner lessons. As she read the schedule, she felt both terrified and thrilled. The paper trembled in her hands, but she clutched it tightly. Signing her name felt like a declaration, not to anyone else, but to herself. She was stepping into a world she had once thought off limits. Walking out of the shop, she carried a mix of fear and pride. The sun was warm on her shoulders, like approval from above. She passed people carrying boards, their confidence radiating. For a moment, she wondered if she belonged among them. Then she reminded herself, belonging was something she would create, not something given. Her friends might never understand. They might say it was a midlife crisis or a waste of time. But deep down, she knew this was not about proving anything to others. It was about reclaiming herself. She had been lost in the shadows of compromise too long. Now, it was her turn to shine. She walked along the boardwalk, clutching her pamphlet like a treasure. Each step felt lighter, each breath fuller. She imagined herself in the water, falling, rising, laughing. The image no longer frightened, hurt, fueled her. For the first time in years, she felt alive with possibility. That the waves roared behind her, as if cheering her decision. Tomorrow would be her first lesson, her first attempt to face the sea. She knew fear would come, but so would courage. And as the ocean called her name again, she whispered back, "I'm ready." The morning sky was soft with streaks of pink as she stepped onto the beach. Her borrowed wetsuit felt awkward, clinging too tightly, yet she forced herself forward. The instructor greeted her with a kind smile, handing her a wide beginner's board. "You'll fall a lot," he said gently, "but that's how you learned." She nodded, heart pounding. On the sand, she practiced lying flat, paddling, and popping up. It seemed easy in theory, her movements almost graceful on solid ground. But when she entered the water, the sea told a different story. The first wave knocked her sideways, tumbling her into the surf. Salt stung her nose and eyes, laughter from nearby surfers echoing. For a moment, shame burned hotter than the sun. She wanted to run, to hide from the sight of others who seemed born to the ocean. Yet the instructor's voice cut through her panic. "Good, you fell. That means you started." His words held no judgment, only encouragement. She realized falling was not failure, was proof of trying. Determined, she climbed back on the board, though her body shook with fatigue. Another wave came, stronger, and once again she toppled into the water. This time, she surfaced laughing, the fear loosening its grip. She felt ridiculous, yet strangely alive. Her failures were not walls, they were stepping stones. As the session continued, she failed again and again. Each tumble grew less frightening, each fall less final. The ocean was teaching her patience, demanding humility. She began to see herself not as clumsy, but as resilient. Every rise from the water was an act of quiet defiance. By the end of the lesson, she managed a shaky attempt to kneel on the board. It lasted only seconds, but it was hers. Her chest swelled with pride, her grin wide despite the salt in her mouth. It wasn't about mastery, it was about courage. She had faced the sea and stayed. Walking home drenched, she felt a new kind of strength. Her hair dripped, her arms ached, but her spirit buzzed with energy. She whispered to herself that tomorrow, she would stand, even if only for a breath. The ocean had become her teacher, and she was ready to learn again. The next day, she returned to the beach with determination. Her body still ached, but her heart was stronger. The instructor greeted her warmly, noticing her eagerness. "You showed up," he said, nodding. "That's already half the battle." His patience calmed her nerves. As they prepared for the lesson, he guided her through balance drills on the sand, correcting her stance with gentle words. Feet apart, knees bent, eyes forward. He reminded. She repeated the motion until it felt natural, her confidence slowly growing. Unlike the chaos of her past, here there was structure, guidance, and steady encouragement. When they entered the water, the waves were gentler than before. She tried again, paddling with awkward arms. This time, she managed to push herself halfway up. For a heartbeat, she balanced before tumbling sideways. The splash was loud, but her laughter was louder. Progress was small, but progress nonetheless. The instructor clapped from the shore, proud of her effort. "Every second longer is victory," he shouted. His words sank deep into her, reshaping how she saw herself. For so long, she had measured her worth by perfection. Now, she was learning to celebrate inches, not miles. During a break, they sat on the sand, boards beside them. He told her stories of others who had started late, people who found freedom in the ocean regardless of age. Listening, she felt less alone, part of something bigger. Her journey was not strange, it was shared, even celebrated. She realized that patience was a gift she had rarely given herself. In her marriage, in her life, she had rushed to please others, always racing. But here, the seed demanded slowness. Each fall and rise was a rhythm she was learning to honor. Patience wasn't weakness, it was strength. As she left that day, her spirit glowed with new understanding. She might not yet stand tall on the board, but she stood taller in herself. The instructor's words echoed in her heart. Show up, and the rest will come. Tomorrow, she vowed, she would show up again. That evening, she sat by her window overlooking the shore. The sound of the waves drifted into her home, stirring memories she had tried to bury. The laughter of couples walking hand in hand brought a pang to her chest. She remembered the long years of her marriage, once filled with promise, later emptied of companionship. Her ex-husband's absence was no longer painful, but the silence he left still lingered. She thought of the dinners eaten in silence, the days of feeling invisible. Surfing had awakened something inside her, something that reminded her she was alive. Yet those old wounds whispered doubts. Was she truly ready to start again? She closed her eyes, recalling the feeling of salt on her lips. Each fall into the sea was like shedding layers of her past. The water didn't ask who she had been, it only asked who she was becoming. In that thought, hope shimmered, fragile yet undeniable. The ocean was her mirror, reflecting possibility. The next morning, while carrying her board, she paused at the shoreline. Waves rose and crashed, their rhythm both fierce and forgiving. She thought of the arguments, the distance, the way love had slipped away. But instead of grief, she felt gratitude. Ending the marriage had been her first act of courage. As she paddled out, the sun glinted on the water, blinding but beautiful. Each stroke of her arms was a reminder of resilience, of moving forward even when tired. She felt lighter, as if the sea itself was helping her release the past. With each wave, she found herself breathing deeper, freer. In a sudden moment, she almost stood on the board. Her body wobbled, knees trembling. Then she fell, but this time, she surfaced laughing with tears in her eyes. The fall was no longer an end. It was a continuation. The ocean wasn't breaking her, it was building her. She walked home soaked, her hair tangled with salt, yet her heart felt untangled, her mind clearer. The memories were still there, but they no longer controlled her. Surfing had become more than sport, it was healing. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring another chance to rise. One afternoon, after a long lesson, she sat on the sand to catch her breath. Nearby, a group of women laughed together, their surfboards resting in a row. They were older than the typical surfers, their hair streaked with silver, their smiles radiant. One of them waved her over warmly, as if she already belonged. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready to join, but the sparkle in their eyes melted her shyness. First week, one asked kindly, noticing her clumsy board. She nodded, embarrassed, but they only smiled wider. Good, another said. That means you're just beginning. Beginnings are powerful. Their acceptance felt like sunlight on her skin. They shared stories of their own journeys, losses, reinventions, late dreams. One had started after retirement, another after surviving illness. Each story was woven with resilience and courage, proof that transformation had no age. Listening, she felt her heart swell with hope. She was no longer just a student, she was part of a tribe. The women invited her to join their informal group. They surfed together, supported each other, and celebrated every tiny victory. She agreed, her voice trembling with excitement. For so long, she had felt invisible, but now, she was seen. Community wrapped around her like the ocean itself. The next morning, she returned to the beach not alone, but alongside her new friends. Their laughter filled the air, their encouragement steady as waves. Together, they paddled out, cheering at each attempt, each fall, each success. It was no longer about competition, it was about lifting one another higher. For the first time in years, she felt a deep sense of belonging. Her loneliness was replaced by connection, her doubts softened by shared courage. These women weren't just surfers, they were lifelines. She realized the ocean had not only given her strength, but also companionship. As the sun dipped low, they promised to meet again tomorrow. Walking home, she carried not just her board, but their voices in her heart. Friendship, like surfing, required trust and persistence. And now, she knew she didn't have to ride the waves alone. The sea was calm that morning, its surface shimmering like glass. She and her new friends paddled out, determination glowing in their eyes. The instructor had reminded her, "Don't fight the ocean, flow with it." She repeated those words as a mantra, steadying her breath. Today, she felt something different inside Readiness. A gentle wave rose behind her, lifting the board with grace. She paddled strongly, pushing against the water. For the first time, her movements felt natural, as if her body understood. With one deep breath, she pressed her hands, lifted her chest, and slowly rose to her feet. The world tilted, but she balanced. For a fleeting moment, she stood tall on the board. The wind rushed through her hair, the sea carried her forward, and joy exploded in her chest. It lasted only seconds before she toppled into the water. But when she surfaced, she was laughing, her arms stretched wide in triumph. She had done it. Her friends cheered loudly from the shore, their voices echoing over the waves. The instructor clapped his hands, pride shining on his face. That brief moment of balance became a milestone, proof of progress. She was no longer imagining, she was living it. The impossible was now real. As she floated, catching her breath, she realized it wasn't about staying up forever. It was about daring to rise at all. Falling didn't erase the victory, it magnified it. Her heart pounded with exhilaration, her body trembling with joy. She whispered to herself, "I can do this." Back on the sand, her friends hugged her tightly. "You're a surfer now," one said, smiling. She laughed, shaking her head, but inside she believed it. The ocean had given her a gift, not perfection, but possibility, and that was enough to change everything. That night, lying in bed, she replayed the moment again and again. It was small, but it was hers. Tomorrow, she knew, there would be bigger waves, harder falls, but now she carried proof in her heart she could rise. The following week, the weather shifted. Dark clouds gathered, and the waves grew rougher, wilder. She stood on the shore, board in hand, her heart uneasy. The sea that had welcomed her now looked fierce, almost threatening. Doubt whispered again. Maybe she was too old, too fragile, too late. Her friends debated whether to surf that day. Some stayed back, while others braved the water. She wanted to join but hesitated, fear coiling tight in her chest. The instructor noticed her silence and said softly, "The ocean changes, but so do you. Trust your strength." His words lingered like an anchor. Despite the encouragement, she felt unsteady. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside. Memories of her failed marriage rushed back, broken promises, empty dinners, words unsaid. The waves seemed to echo her past, crashing hard, relentless. She wondered if the sea was testing her courage or warning her away. She decided to try, though every nerve screamed no. Paddling out, she fought the choppy water, each stroke heavier than before. The wind howled, tossing her like a leaf. When a strong wave hit, she tumbled hard, swallowed by foam. Panic surged as she struggled to breathe, salt burning her throat. Finally surfacing, she gasped for air, clinging to her board. Fear shook her body, tears mixing with seawater. She felt small, powerless, foolish for ever thinking she could belong here. The storm outside had awakened storms within, and both threatened to pull her under. But then she saw her friends, waving and cheering from a distance. Their voices carried faintly, reminding her she wasn't alone. She took a deep breath, gripping the board tighter. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was choosing to rise despite it. Slowly, she paddled back toward the shore. Exhausted, she collapsed onto the sand, her body trembling. Though shaken, she realized she had not given up. She had faced the storm and returned. The ocean had tested her, but it had also shown her strength. Tomorrow, she promised, she would try again. The morning after the storm, she sat quietly on the sand. Her board rested beside her, untouched. As the ocean rolled in calmer waves, she still felt the fear from yesterday, the taste of salt water and panic fresh in her memory. She wondered if she was strong enough to continue. Doubt weighed heavily on her chest. One of her new friends approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to her with a smile, sitting down in the sand. "You looked brave out there," her friend said softly. She shook her head. "I was terrified." Her friend nodded knowingly. "That's what courage is, it's fear-faced." They watched the horizon in silence, the sun breaking through soft clouds. Her friend spoke again, voice gentle but steady. "The ocean is life, sometimes calm, sometimes fierce. It knocks us down, but it always invites us back. What matters is not avoiding the waves, it's learning to rise again." The words sank deep. She thought about her past, the long years of compromise and silence. She had faced storms before, though different from this one. Each time, she had survived, even when she thought she couldn't. Maybe the ocean was not punishing her, but reminding her of who she was. Resilient, unbroken. Her friend placed a hand on hers. Don't measure yourself by how long you stand on the board. Measure yourself by how many times you rise. Tears pricked her eyes as she whispered, I don't want to give up. The response came gently. Then don't. The choice was always hers. For the first time since the storm, her heart lightened. The sea no longer felt like an enemy but a teacher. Each fall, each fear, each stumble was shaping her into someone stronger. Maybe surfing wasn't about conquering the ocean, it was about discovering herself. She stood, brushing the sand from her legs. Her board felt lighter now, almost like a companion. Looking at the waves, she no longer saw danger alone. She saw opportunity. Tomorrow, she decided, she would go back into the water, and this time, she would rise with purpose. The next day, she returned to the beach before sunrise. The sky was painted in soft shades of lavender, the world still quiet. She carried her board with steadier hands, determination in her steps. Her heart beat fast, but it no longer felt like fear. It felt like readiness. Her instructor greeted her with a nod. Back again, he asked, a hint of pride in his voice. She smiled. I'm not done yet. Together, they walked into the waves, the cool water rushing against her ankles. Each step deeper felt like a declaration of courage, a promise to herself. The ocean was calmer today, its rhythm steady and strong. She paddled out, arms moving with more control. When a wave approached, she positioned herself carefully, remembering the lessons. With a deep breath, she pushed up, her knees bent, her eyes forward. For several seconds, she stood tall, her balance firm. Joy surged through her chest as the board carried her forward. She felt the wind on her face, the sea beneath her feet, the thrill of movement alive in every cell. Then, she fell, but this time, she laughed as the water closed around her. Falling no longer meant failure, it meant progress. Again and again, she tried, rising more often, standing longer. Each attempt filled her with energy, her spirit rising higher than the waves. She realized resilience was not about never falling, but about always returning. The ocean demanded her persistence, and she gladly gave it. When the lesson ended, she stood on the shore, dripping and breathless. Her instructor patted her shoulder, saying, You're stronger than you think. She believed it now, not just because of him, but because she felt it deep inside. Strength wasn't a gift, it was a choice she was making daily. Walking home, her board under her arm, she smiled at the sunrise. She no longer carried the weight of yesterday's fear. Instead, she carried the joy of today's victory. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but she was ready. The sea had not defeated her, it had awakened her. The day arrived when the ocean tested her like never before. The waves were larger than usual, powerful but inviting. She stood at the shoreline, her heart racing. Fear whispered, but so did excitement. She had trained for this, fallen for this, risen for this. Today felt different, it felt defining. She paddled out, her arms strong, her breath steady. The horizon stretched wide, endless and alive. She waited, patient, feeling the rhythm of the water. Then, a wave rose behind her, taller than any she had faced. Her chest tightened, but she refused to back away. This was her moment. She paddled hard, the wave lifting her higher, faster. With a deep breath, she pressed her hands and rose. For a few trembling seconds, she balanced, knees bent, eyes forward. The ocean roared beneath her, carrying her with unstoppable force. She was standing, truly standing. Her body wobbled, her heart thundered, but she didn't fall. She let the wave carry her, the wind rushing against her face. The world seemed to pause, her spirit soaring above the water. It was not perfection, but it was triumph. She had become one with the sea. Finally, the ride ended, the wave dissolving into foam. She fell, but this time, it didn't matter. She surfaced with a cry of joy, arms raised high. Her friends cheered from the shore, their voices blending with the sound of the surf. She had done more than surf, she had conquered herself. Floating on the water, she felt tears mingle with salt. This wave was not just a challenge, it was a transformation. Every struggle, every doubt, every fall had led to this moment. The ocean had given her a gift, proof of her resilience, her courage, her rebirth. As she walked back to shore, exhausted but glowing, she felt a shift deep within. She was no longer just learning to surf. She was learning to live again, to rise again, to begin again. The horizon stretched before her, endless with promise. Tomorrow would bring even more. The days after the big wave felt different. She walked through her town with lighter steps, her head held higher. People noticed the glow in her face, though they couldn't guess the reason. Inside, she knew it wasn't about surfing alone. It was about reclaiming her spirit. She had found herself again. Every time she stepped onto her board, she felt stronger. The falls no longer discouraged her. They inspired her to keep rising. She realized the ocean had become her mirror, showing her resilience with every attempt. The rhythm of the waves echoed the rhythm of her heart unbroken. Unstoppable. At home, she decorated her walls with photos of the sea. Her house no longer felt empty. It pulsed with life. The silence that once hurt now felt peaceful, filled with possibility. Even her mornings had changed, no longer heavy with sadness, but alive with purpose. She was transforming from within. Her friends noticed her laughter returning, fuller and freer. "You've changed," one told her, and she smiled. "I think I finally remembered who I am." For years, she had been defined by roles and expectations. Now, she was defined by courage, by her own choices. She was becoming whole again. Each lesson in the water translated into lessons on land. Balance was not just about her fit, it was about her life. Patience was not just for waves, it was for healing. Falling was not defeat, it was proof of trying. She realized surfing was not the goal, but the path to her rebirth. One evening, as the sun set, she stood on the sand watching the tide. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the ocean, for her friends, and for herself. She had stepped into fear and discovered freedom. The sea had taught her what her marriage never could, how to truly live. With eyes on the horizon, she whispered a promise. "I won't go back to who I was. I will keep moving forward." The waves answered with a steady rhythm, as if agreeing. Her transformation was no longer fragile, it was permanent. Tomorrow would be another step into her new life. Word spread about the woman who began surfing at 50. Neighbors grew curious. Strangers admired her courage. Some laughed, but others asked questions, their voices tinged with longing. They wanted to know how she had started, how she had dared. She realized her story was not hers alone. It was a spark for others. Her friends encouraged her to share more, to guide women who felt stuck. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to inspire anyone. But then she remembered how much her own mentors and companions had lifted her. Perhaps her journey could light the path for someone else. She began inviting women from the community to join her on the beach. Some came timidly, others with curiosity, many carrying silent fears. Together, they sat on the sand, talking about beginnings, losses, and hope. She told them, "The ocean doesn't care about age, it only asks that you try." Slowly, more women began to surf with her. They laughed, fell, rose, and celebrated each attempt. It wasn't about skill, it was about freedom, courage, and joy. Watching them, she felt her heart expand. She had found not just healing for herself, but a new purpose, to inspire transformation in others. Her small circle grew into a supportive community. They encouraged one another, both in the water and in life. Birthdays were celebrated, struggles shared, victories honored. The beach became more than sand and sea, it became a sanctuary for resilience. And she was at the heart of it all. She realized that purpose wasn't something to chase, it was something to create. By daring to rise, she had opened doors for others. By showing her vulnerability, she had given them permission to try. Her life was no longer about endings, but about beginnings, hers and theirs. As she left the beach one evening, surrounded by laughter and gratitude, she felt tears of joy. Her story had become bigger than her. She was no longer just a woman who had survived a divorce. She was a guide, a friend, a symbol of new beginnings. The sun was setting, painting the ocean in gold and crimson. She stood on the shore, her surfboard under her arm, the wind in her hair. Around her, women she had once inspired paddled into the waves, their laughter echoing like music. The scene filled her heart with unshakable hope. She thought back to the lonely day after her divorce, when she had first walked this same shore. Back then, she carried nothing but grief and uncertainty. Now, she carried courage, friendship, and purpose. The sea had not erased her past, but it had transformed her future. She had begun again. Her body bore the signs of effort: sore muscles, tanned skin, tangled hair, but her spirit glowed brighter than ever. Every fall into the waves had been worth it. Every rise had been a victory. She was not just surviving anymore, she was truly living. She turned to the horizon, where the ocean stretched endlessly. The waves kept rolling, infinite and eternal. She realized her journey would never be finished because beginnings never end. Each sunrise, each wave, each breath was another chance to start anew. Hope was no longer fragile, it was infinite. Her friends called her name, inviting her into the water. She smiled, feeling young again, fearless again. The ocean beckoned, and she answered. With her board under her, she paddled out, her heart racing with joy. The sea welcomed her like an old friend. As she rose on a wave, the world opened wide before her. She balanced, strong and steady, the wind lifting her spirit. She laughed freely, carried by both water and hope. For a moment, she was weightless, timeless, infinite. She had become one with the ocean. When she returned to shore, the sky was glowing with stars. She looked back at the waves, whispering softly, "Thank you." The ocean had given her not just adventure, but transformation. She walked home with her head high, knowing her story was just beginning. Life would always hold endless hope.